There is a specific kind of silence that follows you into every room. Not the quiet of being alone, the quiet of standing among people and feeling like you arrived from somewhere else entirely. It's the moment you laugh at the right time, not at the right word, say the expected thing, and still feel like you're watching yourself from the outside, like you're present, but not placed, like everyone else received an instruction manual you never saw. And what's unsettling is not the loneliness itself. It's how familiar it feels. You might notice it when you leave a gathering and feel relief instead of connection. Or when someone invites you in genuinely, warmly, and something inside you tightens rather than softens. Or when you finally get what you thought you wanted, acceptance, inclusion, belonging, and feel strangely unchanged, as if the room adjusted around you, but something inside stayed untouched. People assume not belonging looks like rejection. But this feels different. This feels like a being tolerated everywhere and rooted nowhere. Like being adaptable without being anchored. Like being understood just enough to function but never enough to rest. And the confusing part is that nothing is obviously wrong. You can have friends. You can be liked. You can even be loved and still carry the sense that you don't fully arrive anywhere. You might move through jobs, cities, relationships, communities, even identities, always sensing that the fit is temporary. That eventually something will be revealed, not about them, about you. As if one day someone will notice what you've been quietly noticing all along, that you don't quite match the room you're standing in at first. You tell yourself you're just independent or selective or deep or different in a good way. And maybe that's true, but then why does the distance show up even when you don't want it to? Why does closeness feel like a borrowed code? Why does home feel like a concept instead of a place? Why does belonging feel theoretical? There's a moment many people don't talk about. The moment when you realize you don't miss people the way others do, or when you miss them but from far away, like nostalgia without hunger, like memory without gravity. You care deeply, you feel intensely, you notice everything, but the idea of fully merging with a group, a family, a culture, role, it feels heavy, almost unsafe, even when no danger is present and you don't know why. You might notice that you're excellent at reading the emotional weather of a space. You sense when to speak, when to stay quiet, when to adjust. You really disrupt. You really demand. You rarely take up space that hasn't been offered. And yet, you often feel like you're visiting, not living. Like you're always one layer removed from the center of things. What's strange is that people might describe you as calm, grounded, wise, even comforting. They might feel drawn to you without knowing why. They might confide in you, lean on you, feel seen by you, and still when it's time for you to lean back, there's a pause, a hesitation, a sense that something doesn't translate in reverse. It's not that you don't try. It's that trying feels unnatural. You might notice you're often the one who leaves first. Not dramatically, quietly. You disappear without making a point of it. You slip out of spaces before anyone asks you to stay, before attachments deepen, before expectations form. And when you're alone afterward, there's no panic, no regret, just a familiar stillness. Almost like this is where you know how to breathe. People assume those who don't belong anywhere are searching. But this doesn't feel like searching. It feels like remembering something without knowing what it is. Like your body knows a truth your mind hasn't caught up to yet. You may have wondered if something is missing in you or if something extra is there instead. You might have questioned whether you're too sensitive for the world or not sensitive in the right way. You might have wondered if you're meant for something else, somewhere else, someone else. And then you dismiss the thought because it sounds dramatic, because nothing is wrong enough, because you've learned not to make a fuss over feelings that can't be easily explained. So you adapt, you become flexible, you become observant, you become self-contained, You become skilled at being okay in many environments without needing any of them to fully hold you. But here's where the tension lives. Adaptability is often praised, but there is a difference between flexibility and ruthlessness. And you can feel it in the way your body responds when someone says, "You belong here." There's a pause before the relief. Sometimes the relief never comes. Instead, there's a quiet question that rises up uninvited. You might notice you're drawn to edges, to liminal spaces, to roles that allow you to observe rather than embed, to being the listener, the translator, the bridge between people who don't understand each other. You're often the one who understands everyone and feels understood by no one. And you've made peace with that. Or at least you think you have until moments slip through. Moments where you catch yourself wondering what it would feel like to fully exhale somewhere, to stop monitoring, to stop adjusting, to stop preparing for eventual detachment, to just be. But then something inside you pulls back. Not fear, not distrust, something quieter, something older. You may notice that when people get close, they see different versions of you. None of them are fake, but none of them are complete. You show what fits the space you're in. You become fluent in the emotional language of whoever you're with. And you don't feel like you're lying. You just don't feel like you're arriving either. There's a sense that if you fully arrived somewhere, something would be expected of you that you're not sure you can give, or something would be taken that you're not sure you could survive losing. And again, you don't know why. You've replayed your life looking for obvious answers, clear wounds, clear moments, clear explanations, but nothing stands out the way people say it should. No single event, no dramatic break, no clean story, just a long pattern of being slightly out of sync, like dancing half a beat behind the music even when you know the steps. And maybe the most unsettling part is this. You don't feel broken. You feel different in a way that doesn't have language yet. Like you were shaped by something subtle, something that didn't scream or shatter or explode, something that whispered and repeated and settled quietly into your bones, something that taught you how to be everywhere and nowhere at the same time. And if that's true, then the question isn't why you don't belong. The question is, what taught you that belonging was conditional? We won't answer that yet, but sit with the sensation for a moment. The way you move through the world with awareness, but without anchoring it. The way closeness feels both inviting and intrusive. The way you're often the calmest person in the room and the most internally distant. Because this feeling didn't come from nowhere. And it didn't come from who you are. It came from something you learned quietly long before you had words for it. There comes a point where the pattern stops feeling random. Not because someone explains it to you, but because your body reacts before your mind does. You start to notice how certain words land heavier than others. How phrases like "we're family here" or "this is your home now" don't feel comforting. They feel pressurizing, like a door quietly closing behind you. You notice how your chest tightens when permanence is implied. How loyalty framed as obligation makes something inside you go still. How being needed in a way that doesn't leave room to retreat makes your thoughts slow down, not speed up. And at first you assume this means you're avoidant or distant or broken in some subtle way that psychology hasn't named cleanly enough yet. But then you remember something. Not a memory with images, a memory with sensation. The memory of learning very early that staying alert was safer than settling in. That being adaptable mattered more than being rooted. That blending in kept things stable while standing out created consequences. You may not remember anyone saying you don't belong, but you remember learning when to be quieter, when to shrink your reactions, when to not need too much, when to disappear emotionally before someone else did it for you. You learned that being low maintenance kept the peace. You learned that taking up space required permission. You learned that connection could be present and still not be secure. So, You adjusted, not consciously, not dramatically. You became someone who could exist without leaning too hard on anyone. Someone who could move between worlds without demanding one of them claim you fully. And here is the moment where the misunderstanding begins. From the outside, it looks like detachment. From the inside, it feels like control, not control over others, control over exposure. Because once you've learned that closeness can be unpredictable, you don't chase it blindly anymore. You calibrate it, you ration it, you decide how much of yourself enters a space and how much stays protected. That's why belonging feels complicated. Belonging requires letting a place imprint on you. And somewhere along the way, you learn that imprints can cost too much. This is the part most people never see. Your sense of not belonging isn't about rejection. It's about preservation. You didn't grow up feeling held consistently enough to assume that any environment would keep holding you once you fully arrive. So you learn to hover instead of land. And hovering works. It keeps you safe. It keeps you observant. It keeps you mobile. But it also creates that quiet ache you couldn't name earlier. The ache of never fully exhaling. Because here's the unsettling truth. What feels like emotional distance now was once emotional intelligence. You learned to read rooms because rooms were not neutral. You learned to adapt because rigidity had consequences. You learned to belong loosely because belonging tightly was never guaranteed. So you became fluent in partial presence. You learned how to be welcome without being vulnerable, connected without being dependent, included without being exposed. And that skill has followed you into adulthood. That's why you can feel close to people and still feel separate. Why you can love deeply and still feel unplaced. Why you can sit at a table full of people who care about you and still sense that you're standing near the exit. Not because you don't value connection, but because your system learned that connection must always remain optional. Here's where the shift becomes uncomfortable. Because if this pattern was learned, it also means it can be questioned. And questioning it doesn't feel gentle. It feels like standing at the edge of something unfamiliar and realizing that the safety you built may now be the very thing keeping you from rest. Not because it's wrong, but because it's outdated. The truth is you didn't learn to stay unattached because you didn't belong. You learned it because belonging wasn't stable enough to trust. And that difference matters because it reframes the entire story you've been telling yourself. You are not someone who doesn't belong anywhere. You are someone who learned not to anchor until anchoring was proven safe. And safety for you was never about walls or rules or roles. It was about emotional consistency. Something you learned to stop expecting. That's why you often feel most yourself alone, because alone nothing is demanded, nothing is threatened, nothing can be withdrawn. There is no performance, no adaptation, no monitoring, just you. And the world reads that as introversion or independence or mystery. But the deeper truth is simpler and harder to sit with. You became self-contained because containment was never reliably provided. And now when someone offers it, part of you doesn't recognize it as real, or worse, recognizes it as something that might not last. So you remain slightly unattached, slightly mobile, slightly ready, even in places that feel good, especially in places that feel good. Because losing something that finally feels like home would hurt more than never calling anywhere home at all. That's the calculation you didn't realize you were making. And here's the part that doesn't resolve neatly. This pattern doesn't disappear overnight. It doesn't vanish just because you understand it. Understanding doesn't automatically create safety. Safety is built slowly through repeated experiences of being able to stay without shrinking, to connect without bracing, to belong without bargaining pieces of yourself away.